Good morning and welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our continuing series of Kerby Centre Health and Wellness, Financial Management, Information and Entertainment online presentations. As we gather here today, it's vital we also remember the peoples who've gathered here for millennia. This is the Treaty 7 land of the Indigenous peoples of Southern Alberta, the Blackfoot Nations of 𝗙𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, the 𝗺𝘂𝗃 First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda Nations of 𝗺𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗵𝘂𝘂𝗃, and 𝗺𝘂𝗂𝗃, and the historic home of the Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. It is with the goal of reconciliation that we acknowledge the land on which we gather, and we thank the elders of these nations for their timeless contributions to this land. First, I'd like to begin by thanking Servus Credit Union, longtime supporters of Kerby Centre, for their very generous sponsorship of today's presentation and many of our upcoming Kerby Centre online presentations taking place throughout 2021. Today, we're pleased to have representatives of Servus Credit Union joining us today. I'm pleased to introduce Katrina Roth. As a certified financial planner professional with over 20 years of financial services experience, Katrina's team provides comprehensive financial, estate, and wealth protection planning for our members. Working with individuals, multi-generational families, and business owners, Katrina believes every person should have a holistic financial plan that they understand. A plan that adapts as life happens and remains current to capitalize on valuable opportunities as products, strategies, and tax laws evolve. Katrina's team creates plans that not only focus on preserving, growing, and transferring wealth to the next generation, but also on protecting your assets along the way. Thank you very much for joining us today. Katrina, the global pandemic has forced everyone to think a little differently about their finances and charitable giving. For many of us, it's all about the short term, but we know that, that very valuable charitable organizations are working hard to sustain themselves and to continue to provide the critical services that their constituency needs. How has legacy giving changed, and how does investing in a legacy program help these organizations?
Well, thank you very much for inviting us back, Colleen. You're right. These are unprecedented times, and many organizations are struggling for donations because they don't have that physical in-person contact that they are reliant on, and not able to fundraise in many of the traditional ways. And so we've seen an increase in people asking about unique ways where they can stretch their dollars and impact the people and causes that are most important to you. So I'm very excited to be back today, and I'm pleased to be joined by the rest of our team. We have investment specialist Stephanie Greenhoff, our trust and estate officer 𝗺𝗠𝗄𝗎 𝗺𝗃𝗍𝗏, and last but not least, our wealth protection specialist, Jeff McKenzie, who will be our presenter today. Jeff has been in financial services for almost 30 years and has been an accredited certified financial planner since 2003. He specializes in areas of risk, protecting his clients' assets and income, and incorporating planning strategies to assist his clients in making the most of their hard-earned resources. So some of you may have been able to attend our presentation several weeks ago where 𝗺𝗠𝗄𝗎 spoke about estate planning in a more high-level overview. Today, we're going to continue on with that theme and speaking to the point that Colleen brought up. More specifically, we're going to focus on planning your legacy. So essentially, Jeff is going to discuss what happens to your assets when you pass away. And he's going to go over and show us a few strategies that may help your assets, stretch your assets further, leaving more to the people and causes that are important to you. So I'll let Jeff take it away from here.
Thanks, Katrina. That's a great introduction. Mostly factual. I appreciate that. So I just want to sort of piggyback on 𝗺𝗠𝗄𝗎's presentation from a few weeks back. Just to note that when we talk about legacy planning, this is sort of an enhancement on estate planning. It's the other side of the page. It's where we not only look at the best things to do with our assets and the best tax strategies and making sure everything goes where it's supposed to go, but also making sure that we're remembered, that when the next generation comes along, there's something to remember us by. If we want to make an impact on our community, if we want to help out others, how can we do that using our financial planning to make sure that these things happen? So this is a little on the personal side, but I'll start off with a story. These are my boys. This is from about a year ago, and they're now 18, and they lost two of their grandparents when they were about this age. So those guys are down to one grandparent now, and they don't remember three of them. All they've got left is stories that we tell and a few photos kicking around the house. And so it's my goal to make sure that they remember as much as they can. And sometimes when we're doing our planning, we want to make sure that we have an impact that goes beyond just money and assets. So having said that, do we want to leave more for our children or our grandchildren? Do we want to have an impact by funding their education? Do we want to help out our community? And this is done in a number of different ways. There's lots of great causes out there, and it really depends on what's important to you. You want to help out with healthcare? Is medical research important? You want to help your community? Education and scholarships for kids who need help getting through school. Animal causes in the environment, both very important and critical to Canadians these days. So these are some facts I pulled off from StatsCan. This survey is 10 years old now. I'm sure it's due for an update. But some interesting facts just regarding where Canadians put their charitable contributions. 40% of that goes to churches and religious organizations. Canadians in 2010 gave over $10 billion to charity. A fairly generous bunch of people. Donations tend to increase with age because people are maybe a little more committed to their causes. Maybe they've got a little more to pass on. And women donate more to health causes than men. I thought that was an interesting statistic. I can't explain it, but I thought I would throw it in there. As a man, I know I'm never going to get sick. So that's probably where that comes from. So here's a few little tax tidbits just to keep in mind through the next few slides. Because charitable contributions have an impact on your taxes, and which this is where sometimes your financial plan is going to be able to help out with the eventual legacy you leave behind. So charitable contributions create a non-refundable tax credit. So it's actually in Alberta, it's a very sizable tax credit, and up to 75% of your net income can be claimed as donations in any given year. That can be carried forward up to 5 years. And that number, that 75% increases to 100% in the year you pass away and also in the year preceding. So there's a chance there and an opportunity there to not only shelter some of your assets and benefit your tax situation, but also to contribute more just by virtue of the fact that there's more to contribute. Now, Bill C-47 regulates disbursement requirements for charities. I just wanted to note this, that the government regulates this fairly tightly. There are, I think, 90,000 registered charities in Canada. I put a link on the here just so if you feel like going through that list of 90,000, it's on there. But if you have something specific that you want to take a look at, CRA has some great resources there. And also another note, there have been some scams regarding charitable organizations in Canada and elsewhere. And it's a good idea to make sure that you go into this with your eyes open and deal with a reputable charity. Revenue Canada as well has some great resources in that regard. There are some special rules regarding ecological and cultural donations. You can give ecologically sensitive land and get a tax benefit. We're not going to go into that in any particular detail today, but it is something you can bring up with your financial planner or with members of our team, and we'll find something to help you out. Disclaimer, keeping in mind that we're talking about ideas in general here. There's a couple of case studies in here. These are for illustration purposes only. This is not intended to be tax advice. Any ideas that we bring up here, you need to take into account your own personal situation, your financial situation, your family situation, your own priorities, and everyone's situation is going to be unique. Your tax rates are different. There are some insurance ideas in here, so your age and your health are going to factor in. The insurance policies that I use in here are primarily dividend paying, participating whole life insurance policies. I'm surprised I got that all out. But dividends in these policies, I've just used projections using current rates, and those are not guaranteed and they are subject to change. Tax rates and rules can also change in the future, so keep that in mind because what we do today may change in the future, so it's always a good idea to keep your financial planner on speed dial in case tax rules change. And anytime you're taking financial strategies seriously in your own world, make sure you're dealing with your planner, your accountant, and other financial professionals as appropriate to make sure they are suitable to your own particular situation. I was going to put this in small print and let you read it yourself, but I thought I'll just talk it out. So let's get into some strategies. These are the brains behind our operation. I know that we are the face of the operation, but these guys work in the back room with our tax strategies. Okay, first case. This is 𝗿𝗲𝗀𝗆. You remember her from the longest running TV show of all time, Coronation Street. And this is her cat, Rommel. And 𝗿𝗲 is no longer with us, or the actress is not. I am not sure about Rommel. So let's take a look at 𝗿𝗲's situation. Mrs. Ogden has TELUS stocks, which she purchased some time ago. They were purchased at $100,000. They've done fairly well. She's held them for a long time. This is not an endorsement of TELUS stocks. I have no idea what they're doing at the moment. So let's say hypothetically, their value when 𝗿𝗲 passes on is $200,000. So she's made $100,000. She has not paid tax on $100,000 because those shares are still in her brokerage account. When she passes on, that is a deemed disposition, and 50% of that gain is taxable. So $100,000 is the gain, $50,000 is going to be taxable on her final tax return. Her final marginal tax rate is 48%. I use that number throughout this presentation based on Alberta tax rates, but of course your situation may be different. In 𝗿𝗲's case, the tax on her TELUS shares is $24,000. So what she's passing on to her family or her charity is reduced by $24,000. If Mrs. Ogden had chosen instead to give those shares directly to a charity, to give them to a charity, she can do that in kind. The charity will probably cash them in and use them for a good cause. And in this scenario number 2, Mrs. Ogden has done exactly that. She's contributed those TELUS shares in kind to Cares for Cats, a registered charity. These are publicly traded securities contributed in kind. The capital gain is considered to be nil. So at $100,000 that Revenue Canada is looking at as part of their tax base is no longer there. Revenue Canada forgives that amount. She's also going to receive a charitable receipt for $200,000, which is the fair market value at the time, and a tax credit of $49,950. So her legacy in this case, in this scenario, is increased by almost $50,000. And take a look at that tax credit too. The tax credit is actually bigger in Alberta than her tax bill was estimated to be. We have a very generous tax credit system here. And your results will vary because everyone's situation is different. Here's another idea. What about your RRIF? Okay, let's take a look at a different scenario here. This is Steve's RRIF. Steve's not one of our customers. He does his own financial planning, and he has, for whatever reason, chosen to invest his retirement plan in a suitcase of $50 US bills. I can't comment on the suitability of that, but that is what he has chosen to do. Now, Steve at some point passes on and he leaves $100,000 behind unspent on his RRIF. Now, Steve's beneficiaries on his RRIF are his granddaughters, Lulubelle, Isabel, and the black sheep of the family, Jezebel. And His intention was to have this split evenly amongst the three because he loves them all equally, but he's forgotten one beneficiary in his planning, and that's because he hasn't paid any tax on that money. It's basically untaxed money, and CRA is waiting in the wings to take about 50% of that money on his final tax return. So the girl's legacy is reduced by a half, CRA takes the other half approximately, and Steve's estate is depreciated thereby. Now, what Steve decided to do instead was gift his RRIF, and you can actually make a charity the beneficiary on a RRIF contract. He gifts that RRIF to Homes for Dogs. So instead of $100,000 getting split up 4 ways, $100,000 goes directly to a charity that takes care of homeless dogs. I've made up the names and the charities here. If these overlap with actual charities, my apologies. There's lots of good causes out there. So Steve gets a tax credit on his final tax return, resulting in a savings to his estate, increasing the value of the estate by $49,000. Girls get the same amount as the previous scenario. CRA gets nothing. And the best part of this, in regards to Steve's legacy, is that homeless pups get $100,000 and they get nice blue homes. Look how happy that guy is. So let's delve a little bit into my world, insurance strategies around charities. Now, there's certain ways. Let's take a look at this one. This again is dealing with a RRIF, which is, RRIFs are fairly high tax targets for CRA. They tend to get taxed at the highest marginal tax rate, or is fairly common for them to, depending on what that final income is in the last year. But all of your deferred taxes come due and paid due on that day. So RRIFs are a fairly substantial target. So the column on the left is a RRIF where $500,000 is the remaining amount. When it's time to settle that estate, CRA has an invoice due and payable immediately for half of that approximately. The intended beneficiaries are going to get half of that, and then so the total estate, $250,000, not counting other assets. Now, commonly what we'll do in my world is we'll look at ways to mitigate that tax bill, create some liquidity in the estate by putting an insurance plan in place if it's affordable and if it's appropriate. And we'll try and estimate what the tax bill may look like, and we'll put a life insurance policy on the RRIF holder, or on whoever's got the state tax bill. Now, whoever the advisor was on this nailed the target. When the tax bill came due for $250,000, there's a life insurance in place for the exact same amount, which is great because that took care of the tax bill, and the heirs and the beneficiaries of the estate received the same amount that was left behind, and the total estate is completely intact, minus the insurance premiums that were required to put that policy in place. Now, another plan where we piggyback a charitable idea on top of an insurance idea, same situation, $500,000 RRIF, $500,000 pays out from a larger insurance policy. That tax credit eliminates the tax bill on the RRIF. The $500,000 goes to the charity, so that benefits. The heirs get the same amount. The total estate, including the charitable contribution and the benefit to the beneficiaries, is $1 million. So that's using two different ideas to enhance your legacy and leave more behind. There's other things you can do with insurance policies too. If you want to get a tax credit immediately, a cash value insurance policy can be donated to the charity of your choice, a qualifying charity, and you will get a tax credit for the cash value of that policy at the time of donation, subject to those rules in that earlier slide. The charity becomes the beneficiary of the policy. The death benefit does not produce an additional tax credit. So when you pass on, the charity will take that death benefit, or perhaps they'll even cash the policy out early. The only tax credit you get is at the time of donation for the cash value of that policy. Alternately, Charity can own a policy on your life. So this is a similar situation, but you are still paying premiums to the policy, and you are going to pay the charity in order for them to cover your premiums, and you'll create a tax credit from the premiums that are coming out of your account. So that creates the ability to reduce your income while you're still kicking around and reducing your tax rate in those living years. At the same time, you've benefited a charity. Again, the death benefit in this scenario does not produce a tax credit. You're getting your tax credit from the premiums paid while you're alive. So it can be used to reduce your personal income tax rate through the cost of insurance, which is considered a deductible charitable contribution. The downside to both of these things is that the charity is the owner of the policy, and so you have no control over it. Once you've got a charity owning a policy on your life, or you've gifted a paid up policy to a charity, they can make changes to it. They can cancel or cash in that policy. And if you decide you'd rather support a different charity, you no longer have that option because they are the owners of that contract. This is the more common scenario, where the charity is the beneficiary of the life insurance policy itself. So what this will do is create a tax credit at death, which is where most of us need that tax credit, because that's where a lot of our deferred taxes come into play. In this situation, you can use that tax credit up to 100% of the income in your year of death. You can carry it back to the previous year, also at 100%. So it's a very powerful tool to reduce the obligations of your estate. You have complete control over it. You can cancel that policy. You can stop paying premiums and take up your paid up policy at that time. You can change the beneficiary on it. The idea is to create a lasting legacy based on your own wishes and your own priority, and at the same time make a fairly powerful statement and assist your community or your chosen cause with a fairly substantial amount. Charities also have calculators. Red Cross of Canada has a great calculator on their website if you're curious about how a contribution will affect your particular taxes. So it's a great place to start just to get some ideas. So here's a case study. This is Jack. You can tell by looking at Jack that he is more into fish than he is into cats. He's retired, he's widowed, he's 65 years old, and he has $2 million in RSPs, which are going to be converted to RRIFs at some point in time. He intends to leave his estate to his children and to Fishing Unlimited, which is his choice of cause. He's a great fisherman. He likes to make sure that the wetlands are protected and that the trout are stocked in his lakes. And a lot of volunteer organizations do a lot of work in this area to make sure that those conditions continue. And Jack wants to help support that when he's gone. So what he's going to do is use a portion of his RRIF income to purchase a life insurance policy for $2 million. Now the death benefit will be split evenly between the kids and Fishing Unlimited. They'll get $1 million each. The state's going to get a tax credit for the $1 million donation. And the children, of course, are going to benefit from the estate tax saving. Plus they're going to get a portion of that insurance policy. We'll split this into two different scenarios here. Without insurance and without that charitable contribution, that RRIF, of course, is deemed fully taxable in Jack's final year. The state is going to pay $960,000 in taxes based on his situation. The kids are going to receive the remaining approximate $1 million. And this is all assuming that that RRIF is still intact at about $2 million. And the charity, of course, isn't going to get anything. Now, in the situation where he buys a $2 million insurance policy and gives half of that to a charity, the kids are going to receive that $1 million, which they were going to receive from the estate anyways. The charity is going to receive $1 million from the insurance policy. And that charitable tax credit from the charitable contribution results in another $500,000 savings to the estate that they can use to shelter other income. So the family is ahead by about $500,000. The charity is ahead by $1 million compared to scenario number 1. And there's your happy fish. Thanks to Jack. Okay. This one's a little more fun, a little more straightforward, and very popular with grandparents. So let's make our kids happy and our grandkids happy by giving them a whole life insurance policy. Look at how happy that kid is. So when you're deciding how you want to be remembered and how you want your grandkids to remember you, you could, option 1, leave a card to your grandkids. I know my kids would have appreciated that, especially this card. Problem with that is cars depreciate. Carbon tax will make this idea expensive. And kids are terrible drivers. So this one would have been cracked up within 2 weeks. I should say for the record, my kids have not damaged my car yet, but early days yet. Or you can buy your grandkids a pony. But hay is expensive, ponies bite, and you will not be making any friends with their parents, I can guarantee it. So here's an exciting one brought to you by the insurance guy. Option 3. James Bartleby buys a whole life insurance policy for his granddaughter. Mr. Bartleby has a granddaughter, the apple of his eye. She is 1 year old. He purchases a life insurance policy for her birthday. Let's make it Christmas, for $100,000. And the premium on this policy is $1,800 a year, and it's fully paid up in 20 years. This is a participating policy, so dividends are the dividends that roll into this policy, which is the profits of the cash value in that policy shared amongst participating policyholders. The dividends purchase additional insurance and the policy grows over the years, or the policy owner has the option of taking those dividends in cash every year. So let's see what these options look like for 𝗿𝗏, because remember, the idea is to be remembered beyond your time, and this can result in 𝗿𝗏 remembering you in one of 3 ways. 𝗿𝗏, of course, is going to get older and she's going to go to school. She's got an RRSP, which should pay for most of her bachelor's degree. And that insurance policy, by the time 𝗿𝗏 turns 21, policy can be turned over to her tax-free anytime after the age of 18. In this case, she takes that policy when she turns 21. She spends her RRSP getting her bachelor's degree. And then in year 4, when she's anticipating getting her master's degree, she cashes in her policy. And the estimated policy value is projected to be $45,000 at that time, which will pay for a couple of years of university. The tax cost on that is estimated at about $5,000 once that cash value is surrendered. Likely in her situation, if she's going to school full-time, she can offset that with tuition tax credits. So now, several years after Mr. Bartleby has passed away, 𝗿𝗏 is paid for her education. Thanks, Mr. Bartleby. Or she doesn't need it. She gets her bachelor's degree. She works for a few years. And then at age 30, when she's settling down and expecting her first child, she realizes she's going to need insurance, and she already has one in place. Keeping in mind, this policy was paid for year 20 when she was 21 years old. That policy now, the dividends have been growing and building the policy. It's now estimated to be $375,000 death benefit, and she has not paid a premium in 9 years. So that's a nice little surprise, a little less insurance that she needs to buy at that stage in her life, and she can carry on with that insurance as long as she wants. Here's another alternative, and think about this as far as being remembered by your grandkids go. She keeps the policy, but instead of cashing it in for RRSP, instead of letting it grow, she takes a dividend check every year. So the estimated dividends on this paid out annually. By the time she's 21, she's getting a check for about $950 or $900 a year. That's not bad for a university student. It buys a fair amount of craft dinner. By age 65, she still hasn't touched that policy. She's still taking those dividend checks. The dividends are paid out at about $3,400 per year. And at 80, her annual dividend is projected to be about $4,300 a year. And the total to date at that point is about $159,000 in money paid out in that policy up to that point in her life over those 79 years. And keep in mind, the policy is still in place. When Ava passes on, there's still a $100,000 death benefit in place, and she's collected $159,000 in estimated dividends. And the total cost on that policy over the 20 years it was paid for is $1,800 times 20 years, total of $36,000. So not bad. And when that check comes in the mail, she can remember her granddad every year going forward. Okay. Keeping in mind the dividend projections are based on current rates and they are subject to change. So that's it. I don't even know if I'm on time. I've dropped my watch here. So this is my thanking you for your time. And we're going to open this up to questions right now. I can't see the question room here if there's any questions that are pending for us here.
Absolutely. If you have no further slides, if you'd like to end your screen share, then we can open it up. And I think that we have a manageable enough group here today that if anybody wanted to do a raised hand, then you could ask your question in person. Otherwise, feel free to put your questions and answers in the Q&A, or sorry, your questions in the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen on your menu bar, or you can use the chat function. We'll watch both. In the meantime, Jeff, that was an amazing presentation. Thank you very much. It was so humorous. It kind of takes, makes it a little easier to talk about things like that with the humor. So, and I don't know, I hope Jezebel got her fair share. So.
Thanks, Colleen. She did okay.
And I love the idea of the whole life. You know, it's always something to try to think of how do you leave a legacy for your grandchildren. It's tough enough these days to be able to make sure that at the end of your days you have to have enough to look after yourself so that your children don't have to, and be able to leave them a little something. But down the road, what are the options to leave that legacy for your grandchildren? So I love that whole life insurance idea. So I'd like to follow up and pursue that one a little further with you. We got a question in here.
Oh, sorry, yes, I was just going to say, I just saw the question pop up.
Go ahead.
So the question is, for a 65-year-old to buy a $1 million whole life policy, what is the approximate premium?
Oh, good grief. You're going to make me do math.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different policies out there, and there's a lot of different ways of paying for it. I can do an approximate. I'm not actually sure I can. Hang on a second here.
And I think just while you're looking that up, I'll just mention that there's a lot of variables, correct, Jeff, on lifestyle, health, all of that good stuff. So yeah,
you saw my disclaimer coming, because there is going to be a big disclaimer here. And I'm not pulling up best prices, and I'm not pulling up a fancy policy. It'd be about for Jack's situation, it was Jack that was 65, right?
Yes.
It would be about $30,000 a year.
Okay. So
that can go up and down depending on, as Katrina said, health, lifestyle situations. Jack's a fisherman, he's not a skydiver, so he should be okay there. But there's also different policies. There's different prices, different payment schedules. So there's lots of different ways of approaching it.
Right. Yes. And just further to that point is that in Jack's scenario that you presented, he wasn't necessarily using those assets. So your strategy that you came up with was a way to stretch dollars that he wasn't ever planning on needing to access anyways. But for somebody else's situation, this is where you would look at their whole situation and come up with creative solutions for them. correct?
We always look at their whole situation. Yeah. And in Jack's, I know it was a little abbreviated, but we run into this sometime where people have healthy pensions enough to fund their basic lifestyle going forward, and yet they have a taxable asset which they have to take out because the government tells you to. And so sometimes we use that additional liquidity to consider insurance strategies. Now, it's also important to realize that we don't do this in a silo. This is done with the work and the assistance of the personal financial planners, because if we're going to put a strategy like this into place, we need to see their entire financial picture. We need to make sure that it makes sense. We need to make sure they understand what they're getting into, and it needs to be affordable too. There's no point in putting a proposal on the table if it doesn't make sense in terms of their retirement lifestyle and their asset and income management. So I work quite a bit with the investment advisors to put these plans together to make sure that we're doing the best for our clients and taking their entire situation into account.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I will add too that Jeff presented a number of different strategies today, but there are other strategies. Insurance is not necessarily going to be an option for everybody. And so there's other ways that we can look at other charitable gifting strategies as well. And we will focus a little bit more on that at a future presentation. Jeff, just to follow up with that question though, I see the follow-up here asking $30,000 premium for how many years?
I would suggest that we should maybe talk about this in an offline conversation, because like I say, there's different options out there. That one I pulled up was a pay forever. So that's going to go on until you pass away or until you turn 100. So those don't always make sense. If someone lives a long time, the rate of return on that might not be competitive with just putting the money into a TFSA or an alternate investment. But insurance is there to protect you regardless of how long you're around for. So it's something that if you want to explore in detail in regard to your own situation, by all means, get a hold of myself or a member of the team, and we can take a look at it.
We'll make sure that we get your contact to the viewers here. I don't know if you had a slide with that, but definitely if you'd like to provide handouts or a copy of the presentation, then I will send that out to all of our viewers with the notification of the video being placed on YouTube as well, so that people have your contact to follow up with you directly, Jeff, if you like.
Sounds good, Colleen. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I think there'll be a lot of people with further questions there. And anyone else have anything that they would like to, any questions that they would like to ask the panel? I'm just trying to close these ones out here. We have one in chat. Okay, that was looked after earlier. And again, because our crowd is a little bit manageable here today, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask your question yourself, you're more than welcome to. So as far as the taxable benefits that you talked about there, for people, I'm presuming then that if they have someone that they are working with to help to manage their finances, but for example, if you've got, an insurance policy you would like to provide to a charity, is that something that they would come to you or another financial advisor, perhaps go to their lawyer if they would like to make those arrangements?
I would say probably their financial advisor or myself. We work with the insurance companies to determine the value of an existing policy. And if they've got a policy that they want to consider for this sort of strategy, there's a bit of a trade-off there. Do you want to do the contribution now based on the cash value, or do you want to do it in the future, see where the benefit is more preferential from your planning perspective? Do you want to get the tax benefit at the estate? Do you want to get the tax benefit now? There's a few different things that we would need to pull together and involve. So I would suggest that if a call to me seems something you're comfortable with, that is fine. If you're working with somebody already and you've got an advisor on that policy, then by all means knock on their door and let the conversation go from there. But yeah, use this as a resource. But and whenever you're considering these, make sure you're using the advice of qualified financial professionals to make sure that you're making decisions based on the best information.
And I think one of the things too is making sure that it's done in a manner that, you know, on your passing, your estate knows what you've done and the benefits that, you know, the taxable benefits and that kind of thing when it comes time to closing out your estate.
Yeah, absolutely, Colleen. You need to take this into account with your financial plan and your estate plan, which is all part of the same package, definitely.
And that, just picking up on that point, that is where Stephanie and myself come in. So we sort of hold ourselves out as the generalists, if you will, and we'll take a high level overview of how this could impact your entire estate. So, and not just your estate, but also your retirement income planning. And maybe you have some financially dependent people as well. So there's a lot of different moving pieces that we have to consider. And that's when we pull in Jeff and Shirley for their expertise to see whether or not any of these strategies are a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Not much sense making all of these great plans to your benefit if your estate doesn't know enough to follow up on them and make sure that you're getting that full advantage. So.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
One of the things too, and we touched upon there at the beginning, was the charitable donation, and whether it's via insurance or whether, you know, it's cash donations that you're making, often stocks, you know, that can be transferred and that kind of thing. You know, COVID has put a huge amount of pressure on the charitable organizations to be able to continue the works that they're doing. And, you know, and again, people may not have that disposable income to be able to provide cash donations to charities. So this is a great way for people to be able to support the charities that are close to their hearts, and to be able to help organizations. And I know that Rob was not able to join us today, but I know that it's a big part of Kerby Centre's fund development department is working with working with individuals that would like to leave a legacy, and that legacy growing in Kerby Centre. So I know that
yeah,
that's something that they'd be happy to chat about as well.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, Colleen. And I also want to make sure that it's clear that while the strategies that Jeff presented today are fantastic and creative, and in many cases optimal, it's the way we can stretch your dollars and make a bigger impact. Insurance, if it doesn't work for you, and this is also why it's important to speak to one of us one-on-one, because if it is something that maybe there are health issues or other issues that might preclude insurance as a viable option for yourself, there are other strategies that wouldn't necessarily tie up any resources that you're using at the present moment to fund your lifestyle and to create your cash flow. So there are definitely other strategies that we can explore. And yes, the charitable gifting world has gotten very creative in recent years.
That's a good point, Katrina. I just want to point out that when you invite an insurance guy to talk about financial strategies, you're going to get an awful lot of insurance ideas in a presentation. That's like, you know, bringing a carpenter in to fix your plumbing, he'll probably bring a hammer. So these are ideas that may or may not work, but I would start first of all, taking a look at your overall financial strategy to make sure that everything comes together for you. So bring in those generalists first.
And I think in a lot of cases as well that if someone were to approach a charitable organization and suggest that they would like to support, and they don't have the financial planners or people behind them to help out, any charity would be more than willing to help to put them in the right direction. And as you said, Katrina, work creatively to make sure that that person, that donor, is getting the maximum benefit from their generosity. So I would encourage anyone to reach out to our friends from Servus or any other organization if they would like to investigate that further. Anyone else have any questions that they would like to bring forward? And I'm not seeing anything coming forward, but at this moment, I would like to thank Servus Canada and looking forward to our next presentation. We were very excited about your support this coming year and the fact that we could develop these regular series of presentations and on a variety of topics that are going to be of interest to our viewers. So we look forward to the next one coming up here in a couple of months. And if there are no further questions coming, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little screen share as well. And again, as I said, we will share this information with you. We will let you know when the video is going to be available for you. And again, if you have any questions at all, by all means, reach out to me and I'll put you in the right direction here.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, Colleen, as far as our contact information goes, we will provide a handout to you for you to circulate to everyone who attended today. But also, really, any of the viewers can contact any Servus Credit Union branch. And our team works extensively across Calgary, but also in 𝗺𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗃 and High River and to the south as well. So any credit union branch will be able to put you in touch with one of us or one of our colleagues that can help you in this area as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much to Servus Credit Union and the team today for joining us and for this great information and such a fun presentation. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in a couple of months at the next presentation.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you. We'll see you again. And thank you to everyone for joining us today.